Okay, I think we are live. Um, I don't quite know how to link to the live stream because I'd like to tweet it just in case anyone wants to read with me. Stream settings. Stream URL. That doesn't seem like a regular URL. Maybe I can just go to my channel. Great. Let me tweet this real quick. Great. Okay. So I'm just gonna dive right in. I'm sure I'll have lots of comments as we go. This book is a call to action. You can participate. This is for you. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Is that too big? I think that's nice. Maybe that's better. I don't quite know, if you're watching, I don't quite know how you should experience this. Mostly this is just for me to kind of like just generate a way of reflecting in action as I'm reading this. Yeah, so I'm already bought in around the real threat of artificial intelligence, or the likeliest threat is not any kind of cinematic apocalypse, but more of like the end of making sense. I I wonder how people will take this paragraph. I don't know if we'll own up to our loss of understanding. I think we'll probably more likely kind of retroactively explain away our missing understanding. I try to go to places where I think this is already happening, like film, and the way that film is sort of getting destroyed from the inside by, if not exactly AI, advanced analytics. And maybe that's a note for me. Maybe I need to take notes as I write. That seems like a good idea. I don't know. I guess I can make a new tab here, and then people will see that. Yeah, makes sense to take notes while I read. Let's create a new page here. Live reacting. Oh, that's silly. Just notes for AI apocalypse. What is it called? Only you can stop. Better without AI. I don't really have a note-taking practice, so you'll just sort of experience that. Will we own up to our loss of understanding, or will we explain it away? Difference between AI and example advanced analytics. Think basketball Hollywood important? Basketball and Hollywood are the two examples most available for me where this is already happening, that the strategy is becoming driven by these technologies, and we're kind of increasingly alienated from what's happening. Basketball is a less available example for me because I'm not a big fan, but sort of the prevalence of the three-pointer, and then film, just like the movie hero push, in the way that the sort of Marvel Cinematic Universe has emerged. I'm having a little bit trouble here. I guess I'd like to know, like, will I see these scenarios? What are they? Really? No good outcomes? That seems kind of surprising. I don't know if David is going to talk more about his background. But I guess I'll just say if he doesn't now, like, one of the reasons I'm really excited about this is because he's sort of in this lineage of kind of connecting. I mean, I don't know. He's really special because he connects the non-dual Buddhism stuff with the AI applied stuff with the philosophy stuff. And, you know, Hubert Dreyfus, I think, was his advisor. Maybe they had a deeper relationship, the mentorship, I'm not quite sure. But he certainly worked closely with him, and Dreyfus mentions him in what computers still can't do. And Dreyfus is my main sort of, he's the one through whom I experienced Heidegger, and basically, like, I'm pulling my own thoughts and stances toward this are grounded in the same things that David's are, but David is way more steeped in all of them. And yet sometimes I don't understand really his writing. So that always kind of is interesting to me. Like, despite it seeming like I should be the number one audience member for, let's say, meaningness, because I have a non-dual practice and I read Dreyfus and Heidegger and Wittgenstein and all those guys, and, you know, I'm interested in AI. Sometimes it doesn't click for me, and I haven't quite figured out why. It might be that I'm not the target audience because I'm not from the kind of rationalist community. I just sort of missed that altogether. You know, so in terms of AI, like, I guess it's like, you know, is AI a thing that we can oppose? Kind of going back to my previous question about that, for instance, against, like, advanced analytics. I guess I just don't know where are the, like, boundaries of AI and not AI. Can they be withdrawn. I'm excited about the only you can prevent, only you can stop an AI. I think a lot of us experience sort of this sense of helplessness or just futility. Like, what am I supposed to do? And it seems like David is going to talk about that. I find this really interesting. This is like super helpful, just this articulation of AI ethics and AI safety. So I'm just capturing this as like a helpful distinction. And yeah, it's interesting too because I find myself not quite clicking with either category. I streamed some thoughts the other day about what I called apocalypse fantasies or annihilation fantasies, I think I called them. And the annihilation fantasy that I'm most interested in is probably the same as the one that David mentions up top, which is sort of like the end of making sense, or a disconnect from sense making. And I have some fairly good reasons to believe that such a severing would be permanent. That David might go into here, or if not, I'll explore further. This is kind of like reminds me of hey, what's that writer's name? He did Homo. Well, no, it must be called Sapiens. Yuval Noah Harari. I'm going to get the quote now. I'm not going to go deep on this. It's coming up for me, so I'm just, bookmarking it sort of. But I love the way he describes wheat. And, it makes the case that essentially we didn't domesticate wheat, it domesticated us. And I find it really compelling. So I think as I'm reading this section about sort of the way that AI is not a mind, but they act on our minds, they co-opt people to act on their behalf, altering cultural and social systems for their benefit, amassing power, blah, blah, blah. Kind of like wheat, or, sometimes people think about genes this way, or the gut biome. These alien technologies, parasitic. All right, I'm kind of just skimming through this because he's just framing up the 5 chapters. So this is cool. This is kind of speaking to my question around advanced analytics, which is he's targeting neural networks here, and I'll be interested to read more about that. This is just helpful to like kind of capture like I just haven't read enough about what can these technologies actually do, and I trust David to tell me what they can do, and so I just don't know the lingo at all. So like to do what is multi-step reasoning. I can guess, and maybe it'll be something that I need to go figure out at some point soon, but for now I'll just make that a to-do. So I think sort of like foundational claim seems to be, maybe he says it explicitly, like we just don't know. Did he say no one knows? We don't know how they work. And I guess maybe that's another boundary. All right. Chapter 1. I'll go for like an hour. Let me see how long have I gone already? 20 minutes, cool. Let's see if I can make it through chapter 1. Not quite sure, when he talks about shutting them down, I'm not quite sure what his geopolitical stance is here. Maybe I'm coming in with a little bit of like skepticism that like there's a cogent story of like global coordination to shut it down, but I'm going to kind of skim this overview of the chapter and I want to get into the content. It's exciting. Maybe AI will kill me. It's possible. I think one of the first readers. I think I've actually never read that Paperclip story before, and I imagine that that's kind of the origin of the Paperclips game that Frank Lance created. These sort of like parables leave me pretty cold. Like they don't do nothing. Nothing is happening inside me. That's all I have to say. I'm not sure. I mean, it's an interesting claim. Superintelligence is inconceivable by definition. Like, is it? Can't I think about people way smarter than me? And just like push that forward? You know, John von Neumann is this sort of like legendary genius. We know how he lived, we know what his contributions were. So I can conceive of his intelligence, and I think of his intelligence as supra my intelligence. So what would supra his intelligence be? Maybe now he's a charismatic global leader. He's indoctrinating people in secret into his way of thinking. So he's sort of parallelizing his work. I don't know. Yeah, so Chapman also is not necessarily like super animated by this. what are the hands here? I'm not worrying about this because there's nothing I can do. On the other hand, there's good evidence that each of the known scientific approaches to AI have limits. So I guess maybe like maybe he's saying like exploring those limits and exploiting those limits actually could be a way to ward off this threat. On the third, okay, yeah. And here he's using AI in scare quotes for the first time, and I wonder what that will mean. Yeah, it's interesting that he says he shares this intuition at gut level. I I I don't like. I'm more of the perspective that like well, like the paperclip thing. I guess the paperclip thing sort of involves some sentience, but like Ice 9 from Cat's Cradle, that I wouldn't call that a sentient virus or anything like that. It just sort of replicates. And also, I think probably okay, I mean, let's just imagine for a second that we code up a global police powered by AI that is sort of following some. It's not using sentience. It's not using subjective experience. It doesn't have a mind, but it's like a brutally efficient police force. And it's like not wrong. It's like more right in terms of defending the planet than humans are. It's kind of an uncompromising rule book, and it would at once be super intelligent and completely mindless. Those are kinds of like the scenarios that seem likely to me. I'm not sure if that's what he's talking about. Kind of zoned out, and now I'm just reconnecting with this section. Beliefs and intentions. Some psychologists think that what makes us uniquely effective is our ability to coordinate large social groups, which depends on recently evolved special purpose brain mechanisms for reasoning about other minds. They say we have two separate modes of cognition, one for things and one for people, and for other animals whose intentions matter. Mental terms are meaningful only in the second mode. I don't even know about that like frame. On this view, we relate to something using either a thingness cognition or a mindness cognition. Is this like I, it, I, thou? They mistake that as an objective fact about what or who we are relating to. Then we imagine an AI I don't know the intentional stance. I don't really know Dennett. I'm not like totally tracking this. I guess I'll just record that I'm not totally tracking this. I it versus I thou is like kind of a Martin Buber framing, but is really common to a lot of different theories. Kind of I it is like a technological stance, right? An object I can manipulate. I thou is like a person who we kind of honor as having mind just like we have. So I think what Chapman's just saying here is like he's not going to be, he's going to be treating AI as mechanical kind of from here on out, and will make an effort to stay away from anthropomorphizing or doing other stuff that sort of suggests AI sort of has mind in some way that humans do, not necessarily because he's sure that it doesn't, but just that it produces a lot of confusion, isn't that helpful, and a lot of the scenarios can be imagined even if AI doesn't have anything like mind. I like this. You know, he's also kind of we need to tread the middle ground where we neither attribute mind to AI nor do we insist that we have it and AI doesn't, unless we're willing to define it. And I think that defining it is important. Like I don't think Chapman's arguing against that. He explicitly says some do. So go tell me what real understanding is in order to proceed that way. I wonder what that comment was. There's already a comment. I'm not going to go back. So far, I think what Chapman is doing is basically just stripping away the language and framing that gets us distracted from the core issues. He's stripped away kind of super intelligence to some extent. Well, he's basically just sort of said like, let's not even go there because the paperclips example seems feasible, but like what is to be done? Then he's talked about mind like AI and sort of saying mind is not necessary and mind is confusing. Now he's talking about agency. I'm kind of skimming because I'm bought in on this kind of dismantling that he's doing here. I like this. Yeah, I don't know enough about sort of the history of the field of cybernetics. Um, but this is a helpful framing in which he's sort of saying cybernetics, unlike AI or the way they split apart, is that cybernetics is a field concerned with purposive systems. Um, I'm not sure if I'm going all the way there with him at the end there. Like, actually, when I kind of read this, to me, it netted out somewhere slightly different, which is to say that like, um, I do care about the Terminator robot chasing me down because um, yeah, what are the conditions under which the agency of a robot would matter with respect to my strategy for defeating it? I'll just ask the question. And here I'm just typing what I just said, but part of the reason I'm recording this is to not have to do that. Because I'll use AI and automation to transcribe this and potentially try to make sense or organize my thoughts in interesting ways. If agency really is a thing, then my strategy for fighting the Terminator robot ought to be different if it has agency or not. And my first thought is like, then I think agency is a thing, and it doesn't matter because, for instance, like I want to sort of speak to something about like unplugging it, right? Like it seems like there are ways to sort of short circuit or to cut the root of a non-agent, whereas I love what he says, minds may be for or against you, and if they're against you, they're endlessly persistent out of spite. So it almost feels like there's no way to cut off the root of a mind. that's against you. Or if there is, it looks radically different than cutting off the root of a non-agent. But this all feels really abstract. And I'm wondering if I have the ability at this moment to make it more concrete. I'm going to keep reading. This is very interesting. So, oops. Is there sort of this gap, a conceptual gap, where AI has agency in a way that's not familiar to us? Okay. I like this a lot. So So one kind of alien agency is, you know, individual, you know, model, like individual, sort of like a proto agents modeled after, you know, human agents whose behavior makes sense in isolation, but not collectively. Of some, I mean, I think like human groups do this too, no? That's a great title. Distributed kill chains. So this is a little bit messy in my head right now because we started with the example of bots, and they acted stupidly. They caused massive harm in the sense that $1 trillion were lost. But these were like positive feedback loops that broke. But then, in contrast, in the same section, he's bringing up immune system, which are like well coordinated, but have no coordinator or central control. I've been really interested in those kinds of like architectures, and I don't know enough about math or complexity theory or the space to know like how many of those architectures are there. Like, are there just two architectures, von Neumann architectures and non-von Neumann architectures, and there's architectures that have a central controller and architectures that don't have a central controller, or are there like n architectures? Yeah. Or is that not even a helpful way to think about it? I want to see what he has to say about ideologies. I'm kind of skimming this because I feel kind of already steeped in thinking at least about as institutions as like a kind of superhuman. They live a lot longer. They have intergenerational wealth sort of built in. But they also don't have a clear central control. But they're also not distributed. I'm going to try to power through this chapter in the next 10 minutes. Let's see how that goes. I can always come back to it, but I don't want to stream for too long. And I want to leave a little time to just sort of summarize what I've taken away. I don't know what role motivation has in the actual architecture of AI. Maybe we're going to find out. That's a great footnote. Psychology and philosophy both have enormous literatures on motivation and on moral reasoning. Diverse schools within each offer incompatible theories, none of which are broadly accepted. Our understanding in this area consists mainly of pre-scientific intuitions and unsystematic observations. I wonder what here Chapman, okay, this is maybe a brief detour that I can think through. So what would Dreyfus say through Heidegger is that all of our actions are organized around sort of these primitive for the sake of whiches, these sort of like deep structural I musts, so that dots or else dots. And there is like a chain, like sort of a deterministic chain that always goes back to that. So for instance, why am I reading why am I reading this right now and doing it live? It's not that I hold in my head like an intention that I can retrieve, but there is like a chain, a structural chain. I always think about like plants, like the way that a plant grows toward the sun. So there's like a drug that causes it to send growth hormones to like you can always point to one cause, but it's sort of this endless chain. But I think Dreyfus slash Heidegger would say that for us, at least, the chain does sort of have a root, sort of this originary for the sake of which. So for me, it might look something like I'm doing this in public because I want to somehow sort of participate in an intellectual work and be seen as an intellectual. I want to do that. Because I want to be seen as smart. And so this is where I get like a little bit lost in sort of the Enneagram versus the sort of roles. I think the Enneagram would be like a subset for Heidegger of a for the sake of which. So for instance, like, my root might be something like feeling connection and love by sort of performing smartness and sort of being seen as and celebrated as intelligent. Like there's some sense in which some healing will happen if some being comes and is like, wow, you're really smart. I don't quite have that right. Like I'm being a little bit flip with that thing. But another thing is like, I'm doing this in part to explore new businesses. I want to participate in a business so that I can make money, so that I can protect my family, so that I can be a good father, because a good father, I must have funds to support my family in order to be a good father. So that's like another for the sake of which. So I don't think we have to have just one for the sake of which necessarily. So there are these sort of chains, at least in Dreyfus Heidegger, of a kind of causal explanation that do go back. And so I'm just wondering out loud, like, is Chapman here separating himself from that tradition of thinking when he says in the footnote, well, what is it exactly he's saying? He's saying people do not have objective functions, nor do we have such clear-cut goals as AI theories suggest. We clearly don't walk around with conscious rule sheets, either optimizing or optimizing along a key metric, or holding in our head a goal and sort of holding things up and saying, does this align with my goal? If yes, I'll do it. If no, I won't do it. That's clearly not the case. But it also does seem to be the case that one can uncover the kind of operating mechanisms by interpreting action. So it's not that we consciously go about doing things according to some explicit rule sheet that we can hold in hand and share with others, or model or program. But when you look back on action, it's not mere bullshit and being like explaining away or rationalizing, oh yeah, I did that because of this. No, like actually a third party, I think, could actually make sense of somebody's motivation. And I think the Enneagram is maybe the most available, easy way to access that. You might be, a 2, whose sort of founding story is around, loving so that you will receive love. Or a 7, I must experience pleasure so that I can avoid pain. These I must so that. And these also can be dismantled. So they're incomplete. And maybe what Chapman is going to want to say is that, like, these are shitty motivation mechanics to model after. I'm not sure. And again, I don't know enough about Chapman's own kind of stance toward Dreyfus, but I think he's mostly like sympathetic. Maybe this is here. We often, not always, have specific goals in particular situations, but they are contextual, transient, nebulous, and inconsistent. We usually, not always, can see what is moral in particular situations. We can usually say why I did something. I feel like there's like two different there's like, how is my world organized? Right? Like, what shows up for me and how do I act in that world? And that's one way of talking about motivation. The structures that determine what even I can interact with and what even I have available in my world, in my environment. And then there's something kind of different, maybe, which is like, why did you do that? Why did you cross the street when it said do not walk? I was running late. And I don't want to be late for my interview. And those backwards explanations may or may not speak to how my world is organized. Sometimes we might just make shit up and ground it in social acceptability. Sometimes we may actually speak to, because I was trying to do this. Why are we trying to do that? Because I was trying to do that. Why are we trying to do that? And you ask why a few times, and here's what he says. In framework subgoals, asking why a few times should reveal successively more important ones until you reach your terminal goal or overall purpose in life. This rarely provides an accurate, useful, or even meaningful explanation. No one attempts to justify the correctness of disabling the coffee maker by reasoning from ultimate principles, because we know that doesn't work. Yeah, I want to think more on that. But I completely agree that, agree that for, the framework to be of any use, asking why must get us somewhere useful. Dreyfus for the sake of which is does that get us very useful, or does that end up getting us reliably to one of roughly 9 kind of like Pokemon flavors, what are like the lightning Pokemon colors that all people fall into? And if it only does that, the use is more or less to say, wow, isn't it a miracle that anything gets done at all? Probably doesn't have much to do with our inner workings. Like, why do we have cities and government and all this stuff? Okay, I went over already So let me just figure out where I am. I'm still in chapter 1. Let's finish up this section, and then I'll close with some thoughts. Right. I don't really see why yet. But I just don't know enough about AI safety. I don't know anything. Can't there be some like reasonable flexibility with respect to pursuing goals? I just like, imagine we want to train an AI to, or cure malaria. We want no more malaria. And it pursues this. Its motivation is no malaria, and it does it in some nefarious ways, killing all mosquitoes. Maybe, as it's starting to kill all mosquitoes, it turns out that this causes some harm to the ecosystem and some other species starts dying off. So like, stop doing that. Or pumping money into, certain countries that are stricken with malaria, but that money is being, siphoned away toward corruption, or worse, is somehow like turning these countries into sort of dependent states on foreign capital. Like, okay, stop doing that. Like, I don't really get the core of why flexibility can't be coded in. But I'm sure that it explained somewhere. Okay, I kind of lost a little bit about. I understand the danger of monstrous AI, and then the opposite might be an even greater danger, an AI that is inhuman because, unlike us, it has this crisp function. That's a hideous caricature of what it is to be human. Yeah, I guess he's saying we can choose between. I mean, we should choose neither, but if we either don't encode AI with a kind of like motivation mechanic, and it becomes monstrous, i.e., it at some point sort of starts to behave in ways that appear to be rational, um, appear to have mind, and yet we can't talk to it. It can't understand its reason. It's sort of like an alien, inscrutable, radically alien, or actually, what's worse is giving it sort of a very crisp goal set. That's like a golem type monster. So sort of like monstrous AI, golem or alien. Alien versus Predator? I've never seen Predator. Okay. I'm just going to close with some comments about what I understand so far. I think so far the basic gist of the chapter to date has been we should be really scared about AI, but the fear isn't reducible to one kind of AI. So it's not about we should be afraid if AI becomes superintelligence. In that case, superintelligent AI, there's not much to do. We can't even reason about superintelligence. It's not clear what that is, so it doesn't really have much to do with its superintelligence. But let's put aside superintelligence. We shouldn't really limit our fear to just mind-like AI. It's easy to imagine a mindless AI that causes tremendous harm. We shouldn't be worried so much about agency. Agency itself is not well defined, and furthermore, there's like many kinds of agency. There's sort of like a collective distributed agency that can go haywire, like bots in a market, or it can be really well orchestrated, like the immune system. And then there's other kinds of agencies, like institutional agencies. So institutions are kind of like themselves gods. They live indefinitely. They collect a ton of wealth. They're hard to kill. Or ideologies or memes sort of behave a little bit like agents or viruses in a different way. So that's all really scary, and we shouldn't really worry too much about agentic or non-agentic AI. And then finally, motivation. We shouldn't really only be worried about AI with motive or AI without motive. In the case of without motive, AI could sort of become monstrous in the sense of like no one knows what its motives are, or even if it has motives, but still acts in ways that are, alien and scary. Or on the other hand, if it has like a motive that we've created, kind of this like explicit mission, kind of like a golem or a monomaniac could sort of just like trample everything in its path to achieve that motive. So I think where we're at so far is just sort of like a stripping away of various different battlegrounds to make stronger the claim that like there's no one scary kind of AI. AI's scariness doesn't seem to lie in any of these traits, in mind, in motivation, in agency, in sentience, in superintelligence.